President Barry Jagdeo will host a national consultation on Guyana's avoided deforestation position ahead of the post-Kyoto framework negotiations in Copenhagen next year.
Government has intervened to ensure the water accumulated in the city is drained as early as possible.
And City Hall is urged by citizens of Georgetown to step up to the challenge of the rainy season or step down.
The details of these and other stories, business news, and of course the latest sporting action in the Diamond, Mineral Water, and NCN Sport News and more after these. Good evening, I'm Delicia Fletcher.
And I'm Paul Moore.
With this edition of the 6 o'clock news for today, Wednesday, December 10, 2008. Here's what's happening, Paul.
Thanks, Delicia. Climate change negotiations in Poland are moving at a slow pace as industrialized and developing nations struggle to iron out their differences. In light of this situation, UN climate change boss Ivo de Boer expressed doubts about the likelihood of a feasible outcome by the end of the discussions. More in this report.
Since December 1, climate change negotiations in Poland have been stuck over lack of funds and bickering between industrialized and developing countries. And UN climate change chief Ivo de Boer says he does not expect a feasible outcome to adequately address the phenomenon by the end of the Copenhagen round next year. At this stage, he says countries should be careful not to rush talks and end up without the desired results. However, the UN chief is hoping that there can be clarity on new emission cuts from industrialized nations and some form of engagement on the subject from developing countries. Unless there is such a deal on substantial cuts, he fears that the Copenhagen summit will be a failure. While the 1997 Kyoto Protocol provided valuable architecture to deal with global warming, de Boer says it was only a modest first step. According to him, Copenhagen should set a clear overall direction for future global action, with the operational details to be worked out later. Although the financial crisis may have had an impact on interventions, there is optimism that it could lead to a cleaner energy future. But even as EU nations set cuts of 20% by 2020, other nations have been accused of trying to opt out of the commitments made in Bali. Mr. de Boer says new sources of funding will also have to be found in developing nations to deal with the projected impacts of climate change. While the immediate form is unclear, he says it should not affect economic development and poverty eradication in those countries. At this point, the UN climate chief is hoping that political leaders will commit to provide more support to negotiators during the high-level ministerial segment, which begins tomorrow. Reporting for the 6 o'clock news, I'm Shardlal.
President Barry Jagdeo is expected to host a national consultation on Guyana's avoided deforestation position ahead of the post-Kyoto framework negotiations in Copenhagen next year. He notes that the decisions taken at this forum will have a significant impact on how climate change is dealt with in Guyana and other developing countries. Details in this report.
Barry Jagdeo has signaled his intent to embark on a national consultation early next year. This is aimed at educating citizens on the head of state's proposed climate change initiative. They can also voice their opinions and concerns on the way forward. The president believes that the consultation is critical since the post-Kyoto Protocol framework will have implications on how climate change is dealt with in the developing world. For Guyana, this is a major concern since most of the habitable and productive lands are located in vulnerable low-lying areas which are often prone to flooding.
We saw the risk that this entails most tragically in 2005 when floods caused loss of life and economic damage equivalent to 60% of our gross domestic product. This is the most striking climate change challenge we face.
He notes that an issue of this magnitude deserves the full input from all citizens, especially those in Amerindian communities and various political parties.
As a government, we will ensure that all forest and national stakeholders are involved. The international community also has a responsibility. They must recognize that the solutions to deforestation will come from within forest countries, and therefore forest communities and other forest country stakeholders must be seen as equal partners in the search for these solutions.
He believes that Guyana can become a beacon for the world if all stakeholders work to resolve these issues.
Too often we Guyanese fail to see the deep qualities present in our society, but I am confident that our consultation will show the world that our people possess world-class vision, creativity, and innovative capability, coupled with a sincere commitment to a global good that is bigger than all of us.
The Guyanese leader estimates that protecting areas most at risk in regions 4 and 5 would require capital investment of over $400 million, money which could become available if Guyana's call for incentives for its standing forests is realized in the post-Kyoto Protocol framework. However, President Jagdeo has made it clear that this is not an attempt to seek aid, but rather an initiative which aims to help to combat climate change. Reporting for the 6 o'clock news, I'm Shardal Lal.
And the Guyana Forestry Commission says it will be embarking on a public consultation to gather information for the reduced emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. This is in an effort to arrive at a strategy which has to be submitted to the World Bank in the new year. More details in this report.
Recently, Guyana received a $200,000 funding from the World Bank's Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, the FCPF, to prepare a mechanisms readiness plan. Following this initiative, the Guyana Forestry Commission has commenced preparations of the most elaborate version of the readiness plan known as the R Plan. Head of the Planning and Development Division of the GFC, Pradeepa Bolanath, says capacity building and work with communities along with key sector agencies will be conducted to develop a framework on Guyana's forest carbon stock assessment.
So we've already started some work, and work will intensify over the next 6 weeks or so in terms of going out to communities and having them sensitized as to this new initiative, and importantly pointing out to them the important role that they would need to play in this program. Because the program seeks to address not only governmental agencies, but making Guyana as a nation ready for a REDD scheme when Guyana is to fully take advantage of such initiatives, and when it is to be finalized and ratified by the next level of negotiation.
Bolanath is, however, hoping that these undertakings should qualify Guyana to move to the next stage in the coming year.
So we're hopeful that by next year, by mid of next year, we should be able to have accomplished a lot of these activities to bring us to that state of readiness. And then we can move to the other stages which the World Bank has under its work program, under the same Forest Carbon Partnership Facility.
The Forest Carbon Partnership Facility was born out of the Bali climate change talks in 2007. The multi-million-dollar initiative seeks to compensate developing countries, including Guyana, for the value of their standing forests. However, Guyana's selection as an eligible REDD country was based on the submission of a readiness plan to the international body in March this year. In this regard, government has since partnered with Conservation International to undertake a feasibility study titled Biodiversity Mainstreaming Through Avoided Deforestation. In the meantime, Guyana's deforestation rate is among the lowest in the world and could earn in excess of $2 billion per year in carbon credits. Ernestine Jagnaran reporting for the NCN 6 o'clock news.